joined this afternoon. Our topic of our Geneva Pharma Forum is Biotherapeutics, a women formula for patients. And this is really an opportunity for us to have some dialogue on key regulatory issues around biosimilars, biotherapeutics, but then also look at what is the potential impact for patients, key questions that those of you may have who are maybe involved as manufacturers or policymakers or government officials. So I think this is really a good opportunity, and I hope that you will enjoy meeting with everybody today, having some dialogue, and as well as posing questions to the panel. I think the panel is ready to pose some questions to you as well, and we've got a great group of experts and representatives from patient organizations with us. And to kick off the discussion today, we've invited Dr. Gino Grant. He's from Amgen. He's also the chair of IFPMA's Biotherapeutics Committee.
Good afternoon to the Pharma Forum. We will briefly introduce the topic of biotherapeutics and then introduce the panel. So first I'd like to start off asking if who in the audience came here hoping to learn more about biotherapeutics. I'm not counting my colleagues from industry or from WHO that are writing guidance, but I hope that some of you came to learn more about biotherapeutics. So biotherapeutics are a version of medicine that's produced in biological systems, produced in living organisms in terms of their molecular structure than traditional chemical drugs. Now, we hear a lot about them these days because of biotechnology, which has introduced all sorts of revolutionary therapies based on biotherapeutics in the last 30 years. But of course, biotherapeutics have been around a little bit longer. In fact, over 100 years with the use of human insulin, or I should say porcine or bovine insulin derived from animals, of course, to treat diabetes. But it was a little bit over 30 years ago, approximately 40 years ago, that the technology became available to produce these large complex molecules with recombinant technology. And now we can make not just naturally occurring compounds like insulin or growth hormone, which are indicated in this figure up here, but also much more complex, if you will, invented molecules such as monoclonal antibodies that are designed to treat specific conditions. Some things to keep in mind about biotherapeutics: because they're made in living organisms and because they're proteins, they're quite difficult and expensive to manufacture and develop, and they have to be injected. They can't be formulated as a pill, so that does make them a little bit difficult to use sometimes. But because they are designed specifically to target specific pathways of disease, they can have a profound impact on patients who can benefit from them. So that's important. Another thing to keep in mind that has to do with some of the regulations for biotherapeutics: they are injected, as I mentioned, and they can provoke an immune response in some patients. So we always have to study that when we develop a new biotherapeutic. The relevance of these medicines is in many types of disease, including cancer, diabetes, I already mentioned, also chronic inflammatory diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, psoriasis, and new uses and new applications are coming out all the time. In fact, these days I think some interesting metrics. In the past year, approximately 40 to 45% of all new molecular substances registered with WHO were biotherapeutics. So that's amazing. If we look more in terms of what new medicines are actually being registered, which are coming onto the market, in the past 2 years, about a quarter, 25% of new medicines approved by FDA were biotherapeutics. So it's not the majority, but it's becoming a very significant part of the picture. Now, we're also here to talk about regulatory standards and development of biosimilars, or similar biotherapeutic products. That's the acronym used by WHO, but we'll refer to them also as biosimilars here today. Just briefly, biosimilars are copy versions of original biotherapeutic medicines. We don't call them generics because it's impossible to make an exact chemical copy. They're made in living things. Instead, we make a version that is similar to an original biotherapeutic in terms of quality, safety, and efficacy. And we'll hear a little bit about how that occurs from the next few talks, but I wanted to at least introduce the definition. So WHO and also regulators around the world are developing abbreviated regulatory pathways to permit the registration of biosimilars so that we can have competition and reduce prices and improve patient access to these important and amazing medicines. So today's forum will talk about this exciting development, and with that I'd like to introduce our panel. First we will have Dr. Hena Khan from WHO, who will speak about WHO's standards that have been developed for biotherapeutics and biosimilars, including some ongoing work. So we're excited to hear about that. Then we will have Fernando Fon from AMIF. He's the medical director from AMIF, and that is a Mexican pharmaceutical trade group. And he will discuss biotherapeutics from the perspective of a country that is working to improve access to innovative medicines, and also dealing with a rapidly developing biotechnology industry. Finally, we will have Alison Lightbourne, who's policy manager from IFPMA, an International Alliance of Patient Organizations, and she will discuss the importance of engaging patients as knowledgeable partners in the development of and use of biotherapeutics. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Khan.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. Today I would like to share the regulatory expectation for biotherapeutic in line with WHO role and activities. Before I'm going to my presentation, I have to make clear myself. I'm a staff member of WHO, and I have all responsibility for view expressed in this presentation. This is the outline for my presentation today. WHO role, and also I would like to briefly touch WHO biological standardization program and some updates and WHO activities in the area of biotherapeutic, including biosimilars, and resolutions on biotherapeutic from 2014. And finally, I will share the information about the regulatory convergence. So WHO is a coordinating authority for health within the United Nations system on behalf of its 194 member states. WHO has more than 7,000 people working in the headquarters here, and in 6 region offices, and also in 150 country offices. WHO is not a regulatory authority, but is mandated to assist national regulatory authorities. Setting norms and standards and promoting and monitoring their implementation are affirmed as one of the core functions of WHO for the period of 2014 to 2019. WHO Health Assembly is one of the WHO governance bodies, and this is the supreme decision-making body for WHO, and it's attended by delegation from all WHO member states. And the main function is to determine the policies of the WHO. The annual meeting held in May every year. WHO biological standardization. WHO has played a key role for over 60 years in establishing WHO guidelines or recommendations to assure the quality, safety, and efficacy of biological products, as well as in establishing the reference materials or preparations. And all works can be done through the WHO headquarters secretaries, and also WHO expert committee on biological standardization, as well as through the WHO collaborating centers for biological standardization. For the time being, we have 8 collaborating centers for standardization and evaluation of biologicals. Among 8 centers, particularly Health Canada, NIBSC, PEI, NIFDC in China and MFDS in Korea. They are the collaborating centers in the area of biotherapeutics. WHO norms and standard for biologicals. The current paradigm for the biotherapeutic, we have two kinds of standard. We said the written standard and measurement standard. Also the related activities for implementations. WHO written standard, you may hear recommendations or guidelines. The WHO written standard are called recommendations or guidelines. The standards are a basis for national requirement to also promote regulatory convergence. It considers guidance issued by other bodies, intended to complement them, not to create any conflict. And also, they leave some space to national regulatory authority to formulate additional or specific requirements for their country. And it assists with the implementation of the guideline into regulatory and manufacturers' practices in the country. And please keep in mind, this is the living document, so it should be updated further in line with the progress in scientific knowledge and experience. WHO measurement standard. These standards are called reference preparations or reference material. This is to define an internationally agreed unit to allow the comparison of biological measurement worldwide. And it's established as primary standard and used to be calibrated secondary standard. For example, regional, national pharmacopoeia standard or in-house working standard. It made for use in laboratory assay only, should not be used for human use. And there are a lot of confusion between reference preparations and reference products for biosimilar, but this is not the reference product for development of biosimilars. Implementation of standard. The general goals are to facilitate the implementation of evaluation principle of WHO guideline into regulatory and manufacturing practice, to share the experience, and to practice some evaluation principles through case studies. There are several challenges identified. A new standard might need to fit into existing law or regulatory frameworks. Regulators may need some trainings on the new standard, and the industry may not be ready for following the new standard. So strong regulatory system will be essential. And also long-term implementation strategy are required. Also prioritization and target-friendly tools if needed. And I will share some tools for implementations. And I like to share the first ever new resolution on biotherapeutic. This resolution was provided in the meeting of World Health Assembly meeting in 2014, and this is the first resolution on biotherapeutic in WHO. It calls access to biotherapeutic, including similar biotherapeutic products. As usual, the resolution provides recommendations to member states as well as to WHO. So the resolution urges member states to develop or strengthen as appropriate national regulatory assessment and authorization frameworks with a view to meeting the public health needs for biotherapeutics, including biosimilars, to develop the necessary scientific expertise to facilitate the development of solid scientifically based regulatory frameworks that promotes access to products that are affordable, safe, efficacious, and of quality, taking notes of the relevant WHO guideline that may be adapted to the national context and capacity, and to work to ensure that the introduction of new national regulations, where appropriate, does not constitute a barrier to access to quality, safety, efficacious, and affordable biotherapeutic, including biosimilars. And the resolution also recommend WHO to support member states in strengthening their capacity in the area of health regulation of biotherapeutic to support the development of national regulatory frameworks, also to encourage and promote cooperation and exchange of information among member states. Also to convince the WHO Expert Committee on Biological Standardization to update biosimilar guideline adopted in 2009, taking into account the technological advances for characterizations and also considering the national regulatory needs and capacity. And I would like to bring your attention on the concept of regulatory convergence. The convergence goes beyond the development of common standard and processes to take into account implementation by regulatory authorities. It does not require the harmonization of different countries' laws or regulations. Same decision and reached without a legal binding obligations, and is becoming a more widely used term. But there are some challenges. For example, stronger regulatory system will be essential to successful implementation. And as I mentioned before, regulators may need training, and also local industry may not be prepared. Opportunities and solutions. Multinational supply chains are complex, so convergence of standards will be critical. Should support innovation to enable scientific advances in production and control of biologicals to be translated into quality and affordable price. Regulatory science requires increased level of international collaborations. There are many initiatives in the area of biotherapeutics around the world. So I just listed some examples of network we can consider for collaborations. So what should be the role in WHO role in regulatory convergence? Define the appropriate terminology might be good as a tool for common understanding in all member states, and provision of international standards for regulatory evaluation of biologicals. And also WHO should provide up-to-date information of regulatory frameworks in WHO member states. And also the tools for implementations. And as a conclusion, the way forward might be promoting regulatory and policy convergence to improve access to assured quality and affordable biotherapeutics. Thank you.
Now we will talk a little bit about Mexico and what is the current situation regarding biotherapeutic products. And for me, it's a great honor to be here. I want to say thank you very much for your kind attention, and of course for the IFPMA invitation to participate in this important forum here in Geneva. And my first part of the presentation will try to explain how is Mexico as a country, as a general manner to review, a country which is highly dynamic, highly diverse, with a lot of opportunities, but also with a lot of risks. And in this case, we have a great opportunity here in this moment, because in the upcoming years, we will reach the highest population with economic activity. We will have more than 80 million people with capacity to work, but how will be the health of these people if we don't take action right now? If we look the morbidity and the mortality rates in Mexico regarding diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, obesity, those illnesses affect this kind of population. So are we prepared to affront this situation in Mexico? We don't know. We have pending a main reform regarding the health system, and we are working very hard in all sectors in order to achieve this main and important reform, but we are still far away from this perfect system in Mexico. Even though we have the willingness of the health authorities, also of the government. When we look the investment on health here for me it's very important to stress that we will try to see the budget on health as investment, not as a cost. It's very important because we have a gap between the average of the OECD countries, as you can see here. But it's not only related with we need to spend more. We need to spend first more efficiently, and then maybe we need to increase the current budget. It's a challenge. We need to work on that. When we look at the health system, you can find out that we have several institutions there. Almost each institution has their own formulary, their own list of medicines, and also they have their own resources, economical and the human resources. So we have different schemes to attention. The main institution in Mexico is the Instituto Mexicano del Seguro Social, which is the institution that covers people from the private sector. All employees in private companies receive coverage from IMSS. And the second important is the ISSSTE, which is the institution who provides services to the government employees. And then you have other subsystems which cover the rest of population in Mexico. But as I mentioned, each of these institutions have different package of coverage, if may I say, in that manner. So the system is in a certain manner composed by subsystem of health, and it's important for the country to align those subsystems. In the case of our regulatory authority that review all related medicines in Mexico, we have COFEPRIS, which is a huge agency in terms of its coverage, but it's an agency with limited resources, and of course with the limited human resources for provide all those services. And I don't want to go in detail of all of these structures. The most important thing here is that mention that they are organized by commissions, in 5 main commissions, and they provide all the services regarding the review of medicine. As I can see here, is not the only task that COFEPRIS need to cover for Mexican population. And the idea of this agency is to review all the products with a base risk assessment, and the final objective is to protect the population against sanitary risks. It's important to share with you that in 2012, COFEPRIS received the recognition from PAHO as a regulatory agency for Latin America, and also in 2014, COFEPRIS received the recognition from WHO as a functional agency for vaccines. Those recognitions has been very important for us as a country, because this recognition, COFEPRIS is now a very active sanitary agency in Latin American region, and now it's a common practice from this for the officials from COFEPRIS to sign agreements between the different agencies through the region in order to obtain a better way to assess products, in order to facilitate the interchange of information between the agencies for safety, for quality, for efficacy of the medicines. In the case of Mexico, we have a specific previous step for review any new medicine that go into the Mexican market. It's the case of the biotechnological products as well. In the case of biotherapeutics, there is a extra step, because before you go to the new molecules committee, you need to go first with the subcommittee for evaluation of biotechnological products. This evaluation is performed by experts in biotechnological fields and acts as well as a recommendation to the committee that the product will be submitted for a full review within specific timelines into the COFEPRIS evaluation pathway. When we look at the regulation in Mexico regarding biotherapeutics, we will find a lot of regulation that have been issued since 2009. It was the main important at low level, because communication of the official regulation, we received the confirmation of how will be accepted or recognized the products, the biotherapeutic products in Mexico. In the case of innovator products, will receive the innovator product, and for biosimilars, which in Mexico called biocomparables, is the same like biosimilars, but there are only two categories in Mexico. This situation starts to a lot of work during the years until we have the final technical regulation, which is Norma Oficial Mexicana 257. But at the first strategy for COFEPRIS was to deliver some technical regulation, like modification of the secondary regulation in the Article 177, which is related to all biologic products. After that regulation, we have emergency regulation during 2012 and 2013 in order to complete all information regarding biologics and which product will be evaluated as an innovator or as a biosimilar products. It was last year when this new regulation for biotherapeutics was enforced, and with this final regulation we obtained an important step for the Mexican regularization of the local market regarding biologics. In the case of other regulation related with biologics, we have a lot of technical regulations, some of them, for example, related with good manufacturing practices. In this case are for products, and this one is for active substance. These regulations have been updated, and now they have specific information regarding biologics and biosimilar products. But also it's important to mention that in the case of pharmacovigilance regulation, we are under review right now. In fact, this Friday will be review the final version of this regulation. And it's important to mention that in the case of biologics, there is a specific chapter for requirements in terms of product reports related with biological products. When we look at the impact of the NOM 257, we need to understand that there is a great achievement of COFEPRIS in this field, because in the past we have products already registered as biologics, but not reviewed under the new guidelines. So in the past we have around 130 products named as biologics, but right now we have divided by products that has been recognized as innovator products and a group of products that are under review in terms to obtain the full evaluation of their dossiers to recognize it as a biosimilar products. It's clear that we need to have access to the new products that are currently in other countries, and that's why this technical regulation is very important, because for all products and new products, the health authority will use the same standards for evaluations. And the same standards means that all products need to go through this evaluation. It's not the same like a stepwise approach, but it's something like that, because it's case by case. COFEPRIS is evaluated each product. And the first step is characterization. In this case, all products will receive a timeline to present the results of its characterization, and then we go again with the subcommittee to receive what kind of preclinical and clinical studies they will perform in order to achieve the status as a biosimilar product. So it was a very huge step for the Mexican authorities to recognize that they need to review these products in order to standardize the same quality, efficacy and safety for all products and new products as well. So we will see what happened. Maybe some products will receive the status as a biosimilar, and maybe some of them will be withdrawn of the Mexican market. The main important thing right now is all these products are under review, and they have the formal support from health authorities to review the dossier, to review their data, and to provide them enough time to perform their analysis and studies in order to achieve the status. If we review in a general manner what benefits this technical regulation provide us, we can find some important achievements. I already mentioned the all new products use the same standards, but also there will be a reference list. This is very important because for biosimilar rehearsal, we need to have a reference product there. So right now we have a list. This list is available in the website of COFEPRIS, and you can go to there and obtain which product as reference product. And we will feel very comfortable because this list was worked based on the review of the dossiers and reviewing with the full detail of the dossiers, and these products are with the full package of information. If we want to review what happened after approval of a product, we need to think in these 3 steps. These 3 steps is what happened when the product will be for the full access for the patients. The first step is COFEPRIS. They evaluate safety, efficacy, and quality of the products. But the second step is when the product goes to the Consejo de Salubridad General, which this council is dedicated for review all the products from the pharmacoeconomical point of view. This assessment is very important because, as you know, as in every country, I say, the health budget is a limited one. We need to spend more efficiently. So this council is responsible for review all the information regarding pharmacoeconomical aspect of the products and decide if the product should be included or not into the national basic formulary. After that, as I mentioned before, you have to go to this institution in order to get the full access for the patients. And here it's important to mention that the timelines for adoption of a new products is different between institutions. So you have maybe an inclusion with the ISTE, but maybe the product is not available for the IMSS affiliated. And right now, last month, we have an update of secondary regulation from the Consejo de Salubridad General, and in this case, this regulation states that it's mandatory to obtain a feedback, a recommendation from the specific Center for Health Technology Assessment. This center was already functioning in Mexico, but right now has the specific instruction to review the pharmacoeconomic studies for the drug submissions into the National Basic Formulary. So we expect some changes in the near future because this new role of this CENETEC institution, which is dedicated to perform evaluations of health technologies. Here, the idea is to share with you how long it takes to obtain full access. When we go to the sanitary regulatory approval to the full access, we can find in this study performed by IMS a period of 4.2 years for get the full access as an average. It's different, for example, if we talk about orphan drugs, could be longer. Or if we if we are talking about maybe one product like hepatitis, could be a shorter period of time. But as an average, we still need to do a lot of things in terms to assure the fastest access of innovator products. Why? Because these products has a real impact into the lives of the Mexican population, and we need to assure that all stakeholders, COFEPRIS, Consejo, institutions, act at the same time with the same strategy in order to accelerate the access for the benefits of their patients. What happened right now, we need a lot of issues and key points under discussion yet, like extrapolation, interchangeability, substitutions. Those issues are very important to define how all the stakeholders will react regarding biotherapeutic products, innovators and biosimilars. And it's important to mention that in the case of, for example, immunogenicity, it's already stated in our law that it's mandatory to perform an evaluation of the immunogenicity for this kind of products. But also, it's not clear what kind of evaluation. So we have this gap between the what law states and what's the current review. It's happening. So, and as you know, as you hear, those topics are under discussion at global level. So it's not clear what will happen at the end, but we are following very close in order to assure that the pharmaceutical companies are not only interested on spread the message how important are these kind of products. We have, for example, in Mexico, some advocacy groups that are very active, working together and with the health authorities as well in order to ask for more and more precise information regarding this kind of products. What about the safety issues? What about the quality issues? And as an example, this group called Red de Acceso has a position paper regarding biotherapeutic products, and they are very active in order to assure that all patients that go to doctor and will receive a biologic product, they ask for the safety information, for the qualities of the product, what will be the benefits, what will be the risks of taking those kind of products. But also, Fundación Ale, which is related with transplantation, this organization is working very hard in terms of quality of the products. They are focused on the quality, and they performed several forums last year, for example, and they decided to talk about biologics in terms of the value of its quality. But also in the case of physicians, there are some medical associations that are aware of the value of these products, and they decide to state a position paper, like that is the case of Mexican College of Rheumatology, which review all details regarding biologics and decide to do this paper, which explains their position in terms of they need to see the data before to take a decision. In the case of biosimilars, they are asking to the companies to perform their own clinical trials, their own data, in order to assure that when they decide to change the product from innovator to the biosimilar, they will assure the safety of their patients that are receiving this kind of products. And as an association, we have also some activities at regional level and also at the international level. For example, last year we performed this course within the National University, and we have the opportunity to have a lot of international speakers there and share with the authorities, not only with COFEPRIS, but also with IMSS and economy, for example. Why is so important to review these products with the full details. Why it's important to assure that these products, it doesn't matter if innovator or biosimilar, those products has the same standards in terms of its quality, safety, and efficacy. Also, we have a lot of other stakeholders which are we are trying to involve in this message regarding the value of these products, because we are believers that all institutions, associations are involved, because at the end of everything, all the activities that we decide to put in practice are related with the safety of the patients. And our slogan, if may I say, that we are performing, we say at the end, todos somos pacientes, we are all patients, and that's why I'm here trying to sharing with you why Mexico is doing this kind of regulation in order to guarantee the safety, the efficacy, and the quality of these products for the Mexican population. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for having me here today. It's actually really interesting. I've been talking about all things biotherapeutic and biosimilar since I started at IFPMA coming up on 2 years ago. And yet, despite being a type 1 diabetic myself, so having been on insulin for over 20 years, I really had no interest and didn't know that it was a biologic medicine until I started working at IFPO. So that sort of tells you where even an informed patient, and I am an active informed patient with multiple chronic diseases that I could be on multiple biologics or biosimilars for, but that kind of gives you a flavour of where even informed patients can be coming from. I wanted to essentially narrow the gap a little bit by highlighting what matters in principle and in practice for patients, or more to the point, posing the question, I think. And it was nice to hear from the other speakers today a couple key points that actually show you how difficult it is to bridge the gap, I think, not just between patients and other stakeholders, because often patients aren't always at the table with the key discussions and decisions, but actually between the key principles that might exist at international, global level and at national level, but actually in terms of turning those principles and regulations and guidelines into something that can be implemented at the national level and that actually is considered in terms of what impact it has on the end users, that is the patients. So a little bit first in terms of IAPO, we're a global alliance of patients organisations. So we've got at the moment around 250 members, and that varies from small disease specific groups who might be quite or very local and focused on service delivery and supporting their patient community, right through to larger cross-disease umbrella groups that represent, for example, Eurordis in Europe, who represents a range of rare disease areas and has members themselves. Essential aim is to represent patients at the global level and also build their capacity to act regionally and nationally as well as locally themselves, and to help to strengthen not only the knowledge of their patient communities, but also to really highlight the need for patients to be at the true heart of healthcare in terms of right through from policy development, system improvement, research and access to medicines. The other key point I'd just like to highlight at the start is that as for everything, and you may have heard this before, but in terms of patients and the patient view or patient experience, one size does not fit all patients, and that's true for patients as individuals, but also different disease areas and certainly in different countries and contexts. And that's just something to bear in mind, because where IAPO does take a view on biologics and biosimilars, a lot of it comes down to the key messages that cover all areas of healthcare. And some of the views, not so much in this part of the presentation, but when we're having a bit of Q&A later on. Some of that will be my impressions from talking to patient groups and going to make multi-stakeholder meetings. But when I talk to our members in particularly Latin America is very active, there are different views in every country about how to balance the issues and the discussions around quality and access. So that's just a bit of a, I guess, a real headline that one size definitely doesn't fit all patients. So in terms of the key, I guess the key principles for us that really matter are all about patient centricity, and that health systems are designed and delivered so that they answer the needs of patients. And that sounds really obvious, and it's essentially what a lot of people put on their corporate brochures and that they talk about at a lot of presentations. However, this applies to biotherapeutics and biosimilars just as much as any other area, and it's just as hard to make it work in practice. What this really means in terms of our patient-centered principles that we went through with our members and agreed, and they are available on our website, and they've actually been quite long-standing now, are the key points numbers 1 through 8. And when we've done a consultation with our members about their key concerns, and we tend to do a large-scale survey every 1 to 2 years with our members, the word map shows very clearly what comes out as key concerns, and again it's health, definitely, and by health, often patients will actually mean quality of life, not whether their clinical scores are good or not. Access comes out, service, quality, system, treatment, affordability, so all the buzzwords that you're, more than au fait with. In terms of other key principles that apply very much to biotherapeutics and biosimilars, at the very start, it's involvement in all stages. And what that means is in the process of development, identifying what unmet needs are and actually what would best meet patients' needs, right through to the processes of decision making and deliberation on assessment of new medicines and their availability. Of course, alongside involvement in those decisions, you need necessary support. You need to use a variety of methods, particularly to reach underrepresented groups or people who often not only don't have access to the new medicines, but can't really see why it's relevant to them and might just put it in the too hard basket because it uses technical scientific language. And this is why particularly biologics and biosimilars can be even more difficult to communicate with patients about. And I would also highlight there that because patients need to trust so much in their healthcare team, unless you use the variety of methods to speak with and be understood by in terms of the concerns of physicians and the healthcare team, patients will listen to their healthcare team a lot. So if patients don't think that their healthcare team understands and is committed to the use of novel medicines, then it becomes a harder sell for patients. However, on the flip side, in a lot of my discussions with patients, they will, if they've had the conversation with their care team and they've got support of patient groups and in the community, they will often, be more amenable to actually considering new and novel medicines than a lot of clinicians and physicians that I've spoken to as well. So it's not always the patients that need to be won over. I think, and that's where the idea about information, education and training for all comes in. And I've discussed with a few people today that we seem to be talking around and around the same issues. So it doesn't hurt, I think, to come back to first principles about information, but information isn't communication, so communication and interaction needs to be at the heart of these conversations. It's so important that the information be accurate, relevant, and comprehensive. And I would add to that, actually, that it be transparent. One of the interesting things I found out myself only last month was that on and I'd be interested to see if there's any views here today or any information that could shed some light on the decision making around this, where the FDA and the European Medicines Agency guidelines on package leaflets and package information says that for a biosimilar you can essentially cut and paste information from the reference product, which in terms of the scientific basis for first molecule, ensuring quality and safety through the whole production line, I can understand it. From a patient transparency point of view, it's really complex and a little bit frustrating, because although I understand that there are no doubt reasons for those decisions, I don't know what those are. I don't know what the consultation process was, and I'm definitely going to find out, because if I'm going to say that actually it needs to be more transparent, I want to understand what the reasons for it being different are, and being a little bit opaque in terms of transparency of information. On the other hand, in the same conversation, I learned that in Japan and also in Canada, they used a combined approach where you can include data from the reference product, but it clearly states up front that you are taking a biosimilar that has a unique name, and this is clearly registered, and that you can include a combined data set so that it shows very clearly what was for the reference product and what is for the biosimilar. And I appreciate that a lot of patients individually won't read the product information. Personally, I don't really think that's the point, because patient groups who are becoming more and more knowledgeable, they would want to know the answer about why there isn't complete transparency. I think on the information clarity, that's where the pilot testing comes in. And I've spoken to the EMA recently about them trying to bring more patients in, because they find it quite difficult to get enough patients involved who can actually review the revisions to package information. So I was saying that actually that's part of the patient's responsibility as well. If we want more transparent and better information, we have to be prepared to, get our hands dirty and actually get in and help out with that. Also, it's absolutely crucial that written information is not enough. Interaction and communication needs to be two-way, but actually I would say it absolutely needs to be comprehensive between all the stakeholders. Otherwise, there is always the risk that you're missing out a crucial part of the communication. And I spoke to someone about health literacy in research, in the research context the other day, and I learned that actually health literacy isn't just about whether a patient understands words and numbers. It's not pure numeracy and literacy. Health literacy can encompass social media, it can encompass videos, it can encompass really good communication. It doesn't mean whether somebody can read, write and count. And I'm still coming across documentation that appears to link health literacy with the ability to read and write, and I don't think that's appropriate, particularly when you're speaking about some quite technical scientific information. But I just wanted to highlight some of the things that actually in practice are making a difference. There is a perceived lack of necessary expertise to understand the language, the issues, and whether it's relevant for a patient in New Zealand or in Mexico to understand what's actually going on at the global level in terms of regulations, and at the national level in terms of how systems are changing and how infrastructure is being put in place to make sure that medicines are safe and that they're properly considered. But I think the common language needs to be developed to have those conversations. Because if I'm still having a conversation with my GP about whether or not the evidence is there for biologic and biosimilar medicines, I'm not really sure that the conversation has really filtered through to the people who need to use these medicines in daily practice. I think there is broadly a lack of understanding about the value and benefit of patient involvement at every stage, and a lack of knowledge about how to work with patients and patient representatives. I would say, however, that particularly with the internet and social media, there are a lot of really good resources out there. I am trying very hard to get a little space in place between myself and representatives of other patient organisations to try and share examples of good practice, to share videos or infographics that we find, but it is difficult because there is more and more information coming out all the time. And of course, we've got the lack of resources or the difficulty in putting in place system improvements and improvements to communication with health budgets restricted all the time. And both from the WHO perspective and also the national context, I'm really interested to hear about how the challenges are being met in terms of if there are difficulties in implementing international regulations or putting systems in place for effective HTA and assessment at the national level, how can those barriers be overcome when even countries or like the UK with NICE, who's had it in place for a very long time and they're still learning, they're still developing. I was at a meeting at the WHO at the end of last year about HTA because they wanted to try and learn about how do you jump that gap about the time that it takes to develop effective systems. And I think that is so true for biologics and biosimilars because it's so fast moving, and yet it takes in terms of country experience around the world, it's taken a very long time to get to where we are now. So where countries are really trying to pick up the pace, how do you overcome that challenge of running to catch up? And I would say, of course, involving patients in it and actually asking for their views can be really valuable. I was at a meeting with the European Federation of Crohn's and Colitis. They're a member of IFPMA, but they have member organisations across Europe. And I think what was really valuable there is hearing their stories about how different it looks in different countries. In Europe itself, which in some ways is really heartening to see how fast it's moving in some places and how slow it is in others, or where the understanding of what's really needed with a patient taking a biologic or a biosimilar is really quite nuanced in terms of the understanding. So what we've been doing to try and address these barriers in practice is and this is a long time before my time, we did a first consultation and then a briefing paper in 2006. And, unsurprisingly, the same queries keep coming up around safety, side effects, reliability, and regulation. Patient information and education comes up again and again. Switching and substitution between biosimilars, biologics and reference products versus biosimilars. And the key one for me that keeps coming up here is it's not just the fact of the switching, it's where the decision is made. Because if healthcare is truly patient-centred, what that actually means is that the decision about treatment is always with the patient and their healthcare professional and healthcare team. And that is very difficult when health systems are responding in very different ways. But I think the principle needs to be remembered, particularly in regards to switching and substitution. Where in actual fact, from what I've been able to find out so far, there isn't a lot of evidence either way. There's one or two examples of severe adverse effects on a broader population level, but actually in this sort of fast-moving environment, more evidence is absolutely needed. again, the issues around pharmacovigilance and monitoring keeps coming up, and I think it will remain a key issue, not only in our current toolkit, which is 2013. It's available on our website, but we are starting to look at updating it this year. I initially hoped that it wouldn't be a full-scale revision. I was hoping that we'd be able to update some of the regulation aspects and then also put in some national sort of case studies and also examples of how the international regulations are moving on. However, the more I talk to people involved in the issues, the more I think that actually we may need to do some more teasing out of the issues, and I very much would like to make it more accessible with, you know, infographics, some interactivity and videos, because if we're going to be telling everybody else that they need to make more interactive materials, I think we should be doing that ourselves. And I think I just want to flag up in terms of the barriers that need to be addressed. I think the idea of the convergence is excellent. The difficulty with that when you're talking to patient groups at all different levels, from, you know, globally and internationally right through to the local, is how do you marry up the differences in terms of the INN or the batch number or the unique identifier, which in the US looks to be some random group of numbers. And I heard recently from a patient group in the States that just thought that was ridiculous. And I didn't get enough of a chance to tease it out and find out whether that was because it was meaningless or because they actually didn't think it was a good idea. So teasing out, what does it mean if a WHO regulation keeps at the level of INN and says, well, actually member states can put in greater regulations, but there is only so much that a national body can do. There are only, you know, there's the EMA that looks across Europe, but if by a physician and a patient, and then it's changed at the level of prescribing and sort of dispatch at the pharmacy level, and then there's a issue with a certain medication that the patient is taking, unless you can track it all the way back and everybody knows exactly what that patient was taking, including the patient and the physician, how can you really make sure that the medicine is safe in terms of its effect on the patient? So that's why I think our updating might be a little more complex than I initially intended. But which is, I think, is a good thing, because actually if it becomes something that's more useful, then that's essentially what we're after. As I said, I just wanted to finish to sort of highlight about the key areas of building knowledge and understanding in terms of thinking who's actually here today, and if there are ideas around improving policy, health policy across the board, because I know that some people who were invited today weren't actually the sort of what I call the usual suspects of the sort of health science people. But again, I wanted to highlight that actually it is about the strategy linking the international, the national and regional campaigns. Don't forget about the disease awareness, because that's always going to matter. And there are some key groups who have been using these medicines longer, so their experience should be made use of. That education is required for everyone involved, that there needs to be a very clear and strong regulatory pathway. And actually that can be used to help educate people involved in the process, right through from decision makers to patients. That collaboration and transparency between all stakeholders is absolutely crucial. And political will often is the thing that will make a difference. And it was good to hear about the Mexican example, where actually if there is the commitment at the top level, that can often be the key to drive through changes throughout the system. And then just in conclusion, I'd say that essentially, again, from a patient point of view, it is all about being involved and considered at all stages, and that essentially it comes down to nothing about us without us. And that's right, that's not just in the individual clinical encounter. And essentially all of our discussions today need to remember that the patient is the person at the sharp end taking the medicine, and having access to effective, safe and affordable medicine and healthcare is a human right. And we should be able to have access to what we need, that it's affordable, it's safe, and we know it's going to work for us, and we know what to do if it's not working for us. And again, the only way that that's going to happen is if everyone is working together to address the barriers and improve things in principle as well as in practice. Thank you.
I think one of our aspects in industry, at least, we're looking at how can we shorten timelines. How can we make sure that the same documents that we're generating for one health authority is valuable to the other? Any thoughts about how we can be more efficient?
Regarding the regulatory convergence, we made the effort. We tried to more flexible approach for the providing the evaluation principle to be adopted by many manufacturers.
In the case of Pacific Alliance trade, which includes Colombia, Chile, Peru, and Mexico, the health authorities are working together in order to have a kind of understanding memos in terms of interchange some information. For example, in our agenda we have good manufacturing practices certificates. They will be interchanged their information. Also for product information like labeling and something with the full information for physicians as well. And in the case of biotherapeutics, they are working together in order to assure that the international standards will be adopted for all countries. So I think it's very important to mention that in the case of Mexico, they are not looking for harmonization because in terms of impact into the local regulations and law, it's a long way to cover when we can decree that something is harmonized. They prefer to go to this understanding or common understanding in terms to accelerate this interchange of information.
So good afternoon, my name is Catherine Sayers. I'm a reporter for Intellectual Property Watch. This is a question for WHO. I would like to know if there is any biotherapeutics on the WHO essential medicine list. And in that case, because there was some kind of concern when the list was upgraded because some medicine were under patent and still very expensive, and biotherapeutic medicine, there's a concern about access because of the price. So as the WHO, any idea on how to facilitate access for people to those essential medicine easier, well, in general and in particular for biotherapeutics?
Thank you for the comments and interest in WHO work. I'm not the responsible officer, the list and as well as the pricing, but I try to do my best to answer to your question. Actually, WHO doesn't provide the list of essential medicine. Each country should establish the list of essential medicine, but WHO provides the model list of essential medicine. And insulin is in the model list for long. But regarding the other biotherapeutics, I understood several biotherapeutics are in complementary list of the model list. For example, pegylated interferon alpha and filgrastim and monoclonal antibodies, for example, rituximab and trastuzumab. But what the complementary list means, For example, the pegylated interferon alpha may be used in combination with some product for the hepatitis C infection. Then regarding the other biotherapeutics in complementary list, each regulators or government, they should do the kind of assessment, for example, on cost effectiveness, considering the situation in their country. Then they may consider whether the monoclonal antibody will be in the list or not. That's what I understand. Thank you.
Shed some light to Ms. Sladborn's question about identification. You might know that there's a new standard that's on the making and should be released shortly. It's called IDMP, for identification of medicinal product, that goes way further than what we are using today and might answer some of your concerns.
The key concern is, does it work for me in my context, and does it improve or stabilize my quality of life? There are a lot of questions about the switching and the substitution, and I think there's probably just as many different perspectives. Our member, EFCA, the European Federation for Crohn's and Colitis, did a survey of their members about the use of biologics and biosimilars. I think one of the reasons we'd like to repeat that is to find out from patients groups globally about the knowledge, awareness and key concerns. What was interesting to me about the quality, safety and efficacy of the medicine itself, so that says to me the communication still needs to be happening. How do we break down the barriers to who do patients need to speak to and make sure that policy makers and industry people are communicating with each other and at all the decision makers in the pathway, so that patients can be assured that actually the right information is getting through, so that people can make useful access decisions, and also that there is some consistency. Because patients talk to each other over social media all the time, and it's becoming less and less okay for us to notice that a patient in one part of the country, let alone another country altogether, has access to something that we don't. I was interested in your point about the low level of healthcare professional reporting of adverse incidents, and as one of the things that I keep talking about, and again this is I think one of the things you get when you're working often at the global level rather than local, is what does that actually mean in practice, in terms of, did you have any ideas on why there was such a low level of reporting, and also linked to that whether or not there's any means for, or do you see any way that there would be increases in patient feedback and also patient involvement within your emerging systems?
Thank you very much for the question. We have some studies regarding why physicians or healthcare professionals do not report. When we go to the physician, to the private sector, the answers that we received were well, if this is already known adverse reaction, why should I need to report it?